when I got married, my in-laws had this nativity that my grandfather-in-law had made out of wood, and it was a puzzle, and I always thought it was very charming. And so once I started working with clay, I got the idea that I wanted to try and replicate this in clay if I could. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to start out with a slab that's about a half an inch thick. And I'm actually going to need 2 of these. So I'm going to smooth them out. And then I'm going to use my marker technique where I take the template and trace it with a cheap felt tip marker and then spread it onto the slab. So you can see that I've made 2 copies. One is going to be the pieces, and then one is going to be the background that holds all the other pieces. So I'm going to carefully cut these out using an X-Acto knife. So these are the pieces that I'm going to use, and I'm actually going to use that border too, so I don't want to get rid of that. I want to be gentle with that. So I'm carefully going to pull off that border and set it aside. Now I'm going to cut out the background. To do this, I've found that you need to be really careful with your straight edges. So just take your time and go slow. You want your edges to be sharp and crisp. Now I'm going to cut out the pieces. I found also that using the X-Acto knife to cut out the pieces can sometimes go astray. So I'm using the edge of the ruler so I can make long, straight cuts rather quickly. Now this nativity is very abstracted, and these pieces are very stylized and simplified, which I think is part of its charm. Doing some research, I found that this particular nativity, the pattern for this, came from Better Homes and Gardens in the 70s. And so my grandfather-in-law had made his, I think, in the early 90s. So it had been around for a while when he had made it. I've included the pattern in the description below so that you can replicate this. Now, as I'm cutting out these pieces, it's important to realize that the clay is going to shrink, and I wasn't sure how much it was going to warp. So I wanted to make sure that I cut off the edges all the way around each of the pieces so that there would be room for them to shift and to settle and to warp a little bit. So you can see I'm shaving off the edges around all the sides, again, so that it has room to expand and contract and do what it's going to do. You'll also notice I'm poking in little eyeballs, because that's really all the only facial features that these figures have, which again I think is part of its charm. Three kings, or the 3 wise men, they all have this kind of crisscross pattern on their top, which is supposed to symbolize their crowns that they're wearing. So that's what this figure is here, is that it's one of the wise men. So again, I'm taking off edges so that it has room to expand and contract. And I want to smooth those edges off a little bit. The clay I'm using for this project, I decided on a mid-fired porcelain because I wanted these just to be white and very simple. Now that I've cut off all the pieces, I'm going to attach the edge or the border onto the background. That marker that you see on the background will burn out in the kiln. So I score both sides. I use some slip and some water, and I apply some good pressure here. And then I want to stitch those two pieces together really well to make sure that they fit. And I'm going to smooth it out with a sponge. Now when I fired these, I glazed them on all sides except for the bottom, so they actually stood them up in the kiln. And so when they fired, they came out nice and shiny and really pretty. And here's the finished nativity set.